Alright, let's talk about Girls Frontline 2 Exilium and why picking the right characters can completely change how your battles play out. Some dolls don't just make things easier, they straight up carry you through brutal fights and save you from endless retries. That's exactly why a solid tier list matters, especially if you're aiming to survive the mid to late game without losing your sanity. Every character has their own style and strengths, sure, but let's be honest, there are a few that clearly stand above the rest. In this video, we're breaking down the best characters in the global version of GFL2 and ranking them based on real performance, not just hype. Whether you're brand new, stuck on tougher stages, or wondering who's actually worth re-rolling for on the current banner, you're in the right place. Think of this as a friendly guide to building a roster that feels powerful, smooth, and actually fun to play. Let's jump in and see which dolls truly deserve a top spot on the battlefield. I'm quickly moving on to the video and I'm ranking characters in Girls Frontline 2 Exilium. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching! The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Peritia, Yuhi, Nagant, Vepli, Litara, Krolik, and Vepli. Let's talk about those characters you want to like, but the game keeps gently tapping you on the shoulder and whispering, maybe not today. Welcome to the C-tier corner of Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, where good ideas meet awkward execution. Peritia walks onto the battlefield with a big gun and big confidence. As an SSR sentinel wielding a light machine gun, her whole identity is about spraying enemies with physical damage mixed with area of effect corrosive shots. In the early stages of the game, this actually feels pretty satisfying. Groups of weaker enemies melt, numbers fly everywhere, and you think, okay, Peritia might be cooking something here. But as you move into the mid and the late game, reality hits hard. Tougher enemies don't care much about wide splash damage, they demand fast, focused, single target, burst damage. While Peritia is busy painting the whole map green, elite enemies are winding up their devastating attacks. By the time she finishes spreading damage evenly, someone on your team is already in trouble. Fun early on, but she slowly fades out once precision becomes more valuable than chaos. Yuhi is one of those characters who sounds amazing when you read her kit. She is a physical support doll who specializes in boosting team damage and lowering enemy defenses, which is exactly what you want when running strong single-target damage dealers like Diane or Ulrid. On paper, she looks like the perfect partner for deleting enemies before they even get a turn. The problem is not Yuhi herself, it's the current global meta. Girls Frontline 2 Exilium simply does not have enough strong physical damage dolls to fully unlock her potential right now. On top of that, she brings no sustain and no map-wide healing, which makes her feel awkward compared to dominant supports like Suomi. Yuhi ends up being very situational, great in theory, limited in practice, and mostly waiting for future characters to save her. Nagant shows up with a handgun and a very specific job, ruin enemy defenses. She applies acid corrosion damage and reduces enemy defense by 30%, then follows it up with her ultimate to stack an additional 10% defense reduction. When everything lines up perfectly, your main damage dealer can hit noticeably harder, and those numbers finally start to feel rewarding. Unfortunately, once the novelty wears off, Nagant's weaknesses become obvious. Outside of defense debuffs and a stun, she does not bring much else to the table. No major utility, no team-saving mechanics, and nothing particularly unique. Many other characters already include similar effects as part of their regular kits, which makes Nagant feel redundant. She works, but she rarely feels necessary, and that is a dangerous place to be in this game. Litara's design screams suppression. She is another sentinel using a light machine gun, focusing on area damage and applying defense down debuffs while raining bullets across the field. On paper, it feels like she should dominate groups of enemies and soften them up for the rest of your squad. In reality, her damage output simply does not keep up. Even at maximum level, her total damage caps out at 834, which puts her well behind other sentinel damage dealers. She can absolutely carry you through the early game, but once stronger options like Cheongju or Tololo become available, Litara starts feeling like dead weight. She is not terrible, just quickly outclassed. Krolik is the kind of character that makes you say, why would I use this when Ulrid exists? She is a Vanguard sword unit who brings burn damage to fire-focused teams, and yes, that burn can be useful in very specific setups. If you are desperate for a melee fire unit, she technically does the job, but the comparison is brutal. Her maximum damage sits at 770, far below Ulrid's 921, and she is noticeably squishier as well. For a frontline unit whose entire purpose is to get close and personal with enemies, being fragile is a huge problem. Krolik is not unplayable, but she constantly feels like a downgrade. Fine as a placeholder, but never the final choice. And that's the C-tier crew in Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, characters with potential, personality, and just enough flaws to keep them sitting on the bench while the metastars take center stage. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Groza, Mekti, Papasha, Jiaohui, Cheetah, Dushevnaya, Ulrid, Kolfin, and Florence. This is where things get interesting, because B tier is the land of actually useful, just not broken. These characters do work, they just need the right moment, the right team, and sometimes a bit of patience. Let's jump back into Girls Frontline 2 Exilium and talk about them one by one. Dushevnaya is a support unit who lives and breathes freeze damage. She hands out a 10% freeze and damage buff to allies, which immediately makes her appealing for ice-focused teams. When enemies are properly weakened and frozen at the right time, fights feel smoother and much more controlled, especially if you plan your turns carefully. The issue is competition. When you place Dushevnaya next to Suomi, the difference in overall impact is hard to ignore. Dushevnaya brings no healing and no shielding, which makes her feel incomplete in many situations. Still, as a pure ice buffer, she does her job well, and in the right composition, she can absolutely justify her slot, even if she is not a priority pool. Ulrid is what happens when someone looks at a gunfight and says, "Nah, I'll take a sword." She is a hypermobile vanguard character who specializes in getting right up in the enemy's face and tearing them apart at incredible speed. Thanks to instant access to her strongest abilities, Ulrid can absolutely dominate early and mid-game missions. That said, she does start to slow down once late-game enemies gain massive health pools. Ulrid survives by movement and camouflage rather than raw toughness, so reckless plays can get her punished. The best way to use her is surgical. Soften enemies with ranged units first, then let Ulrid dash in and clean up what is left. Played smart, she feels amazing. Kolfni is the definition of classic healer. She heals, she stabilizes, and that's basically it. In the very early game, when your roster is limited, her presence can genuinely save runs and keep your team alive through rough encounters. As the game opens up, though, her simplicity becomes a weakness. Other support characters offer healing plus damage buffs, debuffs, or utility skills that completely overshadow her kit. The reason she avoids C tier is her excellent stability recovery, which can be clutch in longer missions. She is not exciting, but she is reliable when the options are scarce. Groza steps into the battlefield with one clear purpose: protect the team. As a classic tank, she provides defensive buffs of up to 30% to nearby allies and reduces enemy movement by 2 tiles. She is not flashy, but she is dependable. Those movement reductions are more impactful than they sound. Slowing down dangerous enemies can give your damage dealers the breathing room they desperately need. Groza shines when positioning matters, and when keeping enemies away from fragile damage dealers is the difference between victory and a reset. She quietly does her job, and does it well. Mekthi is a support character who leans heavily into amplifying damage. She excels against tougher bosses thanks to her ability to boost team damage and apply area of effect corrosion damage. When paired with the right allies, she can noticeably speed up difficult encounters. The catches is synergy. Without the proper team built around her strengths, Mekthi feels underwhelming. She is not a must pull, and she is often outclassed by characters who offer similar effects with fewer restrictions. She is solid, just very dependent on context, which keeps her firmly in B tier. If there is one word that defines Cheetah, it is buffs. She absolutely loves handing them out. Her ultimate ability grants 2 random buffs to all allies for 2 turns, which sounds incredible at first glance. Unfortunately, randomness is the enemy of consistency. Those buffs are not always useful, and when compared to more reliable support characters, Cheetah starts to feel shaky. Her passive healing is nice, but it does not compensate for the lack of control in her kit. She works, but she can be frustrating when the wrong buffs roll at the wrong time. Papasha is a sentinel unit focused on physical damage and debuff removal. Right at the start of battle, she summons a City Warden, which can grant a 20% attack boost whenever it lands a critical hit. That mechanic alone makes her extremely fun to use. She truly shines in platoon content, where her strengths line up perfectly with the mode's demands. Outside of that though, she struggles to compete with stronger physical damage dealers in the current meta. She is good, just not dominant, which is why she comfortably sits in B tier. Xiaohui arrives as a hybrid damage dealer, mixing physical and hydro damage while summoning imperturbable arrow across multiple tiles. She also has decent mobility, which helps her reposition and respond to enemy threats. Her biggest problem is raw damage. Compared to other options, her output feels lacking unless the team is carefully built around her. With enough investment, she can work, but right now there are simply too many stronger, easier to use alternatives. She is promising, but not quite there yet. Florence is the kind of support you appreciate more the longer a fight lasts. She focuses on keeping the team alive through steady healing, clearing debuffs, and providing consistent buffs. She is easy to use and does not demand constant attention. While she lacks the explosive impact needed for S-tier status, her versatility makes her a safe and dependable pick. Florence works best alongside strong damage dealers who can take advantage of the breathing room she creates. She may not steal the spotlight, but she absolutely earns her place in B tier. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Diane, Centaurisi, Lotta, Nemesis, Mosin Nagant, Xenia, Sabrina, Sharkri, Tololo, Chihua, Andoris, Jiangyu, Lind, and Lainey. This is the tier where things stop being almost and start being actually scary. A-tier characters in Girls Frontline 2, Exilium are the ones that feel powerful the moment you put them on the field, but just miss that unfair meta-warping edge. Let's break them down. Diane is the kind of character who walks into a fight, adjusts everyone's posture and says, "Alright, now do it properly." She is built for boss encounters, using perfect tuning to disrupt enemy buffs and make life much easier for your main damage dealers. With the heavy cord rifle equipped, she can even strip enemy buffs while handing out random buffs to the team when she is at full health. What keeps her in A tier instead of higher is that Diane is more of a setup artist than a finisher. She makes everyone else stronger but rarely steals the spotlight herself. That said, she is a very flexible vanguard unit who fits into multiple team compositions and always feels useful, reliable, clever, and quietly impactful. Centaurisi is an elite support doll who thrives in fire-based teams. She applies burn damage to enemies while also healing allies, which already gives her strong dual value. If you are aiming to build a burn composition, she feels almost tailor-made for the job. Her ultimate, Afternoon Tea Break, is where things really shine. It restores 100% of her attack power as healing to all allies, recovers up to 7 points of stability damage for a single unit, and cleanses debuffs. She is not the strongest burn unit overall, but her versatility makes her incredibly comfortable to play, and that consistency earns her a solid A-tier spot. Lotta does not knock, she kicks the door in with a shotgun. Her area of effect attacks are brutal, especially when enemies are clustered together. Her passive skill becomes terrifying when enemies are inflicted with frostbite, triggering a follow-up attack that deals 50% of her attack power as area physical damage. Her ultimate Amplified Courage ignores damage reduction from cover and even grants an extra command if you hit 2 or more enemies. That is huge in crowd control scenarios. Lotta earns her A-tier ranking thanks to strong freeze synergy and reliable area damage, especially alongside units like Suomi and Macchiato. The downside is long cooldowns, but when she fires, she fires. Mosin Nagant is the classic sniper fantasy done right. She operates from long range, deleting enemies from across the map with high damage rifle shots. On top of that, her active skills and ultimate apply paralysis, locking enemies down and preventing retaliation. Her biggest weakness is mobility, or rather, the lack of it. If she gets caught out of position, things can go downhill quickly. The correct way to play her is simple. Park her in the back, protect her with allies, and let her control the battlefield from a safe distance. Played properly, she is deadly. Xenia exists in the shadow of Suomi, but that does not mean she is weak. She is the second best support option if you are unlucky with pulls, focusing on burn application and clutch healing. She keeps teams alive while still contributing offensively. Her ultimate and passive grant, Blazing Assault level 2 to herself and one ally, increasing attack by 15%. While her damage output does not match Suomi's overall impact, she is still a strong choice for burn compositions or early accounts. Dependable, but clearly one step below the queen. Sharkri is pure single target violence. Every part of her kit is designed to instantly delete priority enemies using high-powered assault rifle shots. Her passive boosts her critical hit rate by 20% when enemies are affected by overburn, which she can apply consistently herself. Pair her with other burn characters like Tololo, and her damage spikes hard. With a range of up to 8 tiles, Sharkry can also safely eliminate distant threats. She is not flashy, she is efficient, lethal, and incredibly satisfying when things go according to plan. Tololo is an early to mid game monster. Her passive ability is one of the strongest in the game, allowing her to take 2 turns at the start of battle and whenever her Confectance Index is fully charged. That kind of tempo control is absurdly powerful. She snowballs fights before enemies even get a chance to react. While she eventually falls off compared to late game specialists, Tololo absolutely dominates progression content and remains relevant in many team setups. Simple, aggressive, and extremely effective. Kyuhua is an SSR support and debuffer who specializes in battlefield control. She applies corrosion effects, reduces enemy movement, and lowers defenses across multiple targets. Her kit is all about creating openings and then keeping them open. She shines in boss fights and crowd control stages, especially when paired with damage dealers like Tololo or Klukai who can capitalize on weakened enemies. While she does not provide massive raw healing, her control and disruption tools make her a consistent and valuable pick in difficult content. Sabrina is a tank who refuses to stand still. She charges into enemies with her shotgun, dealing area of effect hydro damage and soaking hits at close range. Alone, she is solid, but paired with Tololo, she becomes terrifying. Every time Sabrina deals hydro damage, Tololo gains stacking critical hit rate and critical damage bonuses. Combine that with Sabrina's own attack buffs and counterattacks, and the duo can completely overwhelm the battlefield. She is aggressive tanking done right. Vepley is one of the free Vanguard characters, and she shows it. She uses a shotgun and focuses on knocking enemies back, which sounds useful until it is not. Her damage is low, and her knockback can actively hurt your positioning, pushing enemies out of reach of your damage dealers. Compared to other Vanguard options, she struggles to justify her slot. Usable but often frustrating, Nemesis is the definition of safe value. She operates from the backline with an impressive 9-tile range and applies defense down debuffs that help your main damage dealers shred armored enemies. She is not explosive, but she does not need to be. Her consistency, range, and utility make her perfect for late game compositions where survival and armor shredding matter more than raw burst. Quietly excellent, Andoris is the engine behind the windscreen. She stacks buffs on allies, weakens enemies, and sets up massive damage turns without ever demanding attention herself. She needs teammates who can capitalize on her setup, but when she has them, fights tilt dramatically in your favor. She is not flashy, but she is powerful in the way that actually wins battles. Jungyu exists to break stability, and she does it fast. She tears through enemy stability bars, leaving targets exposed and vulnerable to devastating follow-ups. She thrives in aggressive teams where early pressure matters. Pair her with heavy hitters, and every crack she creates turns into a full collapse. Momentum is her weapon, and she never lets go. Lind arrived and immediately made Corrosion team smile. Armed with a shotgun and the Honey Trap debuff, she stacks sugar on enemies, which later detonates into powerful area of effect damage. She performs best in dedicated corrosion compositions, but does not require constant babysitting. As long as debuffs keep flowing, her damage ramps up hard. She earned her A-tier status quickly and deservedly. Lainey is deceptively simple and brutally effective. Her clone mirrors her attacks, effectively doubling her damage output. Add grenades and mix damage into the equation, and you get a walking damage engine. She requires very little micromanagement and fits perfectly into teams that want straightforward, high-impact sentinel damage. Clean, efficient, and deadly, Lainey does exactly what she promises. That's A-tier, powerful, reliable, and just one step away from completely breaking the game. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Klukai, Suomi, Macchiato, Kyongju, Vector, Springfield, Niketa, Belka, Lever, Lena, and Rebella. Now we're officially in "this is unfair" territory. S-tier characters in Girls Frontline 2 Exilium are not just strong, they actively change how fights feel. These are the dolls that carry teams, warp metas, and make hard content suddenly look manageable. Niketa showed up and immediately chose violence in the best way possible. As a marksman, she deletes priority targets from long range before they even get a chance to act. Her damage is high, her positioning is safe, and most importantly, she is incredibly easy to use. What really pushes her into S tier is her independence. She does not need constant protection or heavy setup to shine. Add a debuffer to soften enemies first, and she becomes even scarier. Clean, efficient, and brutally effective, Niketa is the definition of plug-and-play power. Klukai is corrosion damage taken to its logical extreme. She excels at wide area attacks, melting groups of enemies while also applying defensive debuffs that make follow-up damage hit even harder. Watching entire packs dissolve under her attacks never gets old. Her synergy potential is absurd. When paired with another corrosion dealer like Peritia, Klukai's area attacks trigger action support effects, boosting Peritia's damage on top of her own. She is powerful on her own, terrifying with support, and earns her S tier slot without question. Suomi is the gold standard for support characters in Girls Frontline 2. She brings massive shields, absorbs damage like a wall, heals the entire team, and cleanses debuffs, all in one kit. If survival is an issue, Suomi is the answer. What makes her truly broken is that she also deals real damage. The more defense she stacks, the harder she hits, turning her into a hybrid tank, healer, and DPS all at once. She fits into every team composition and improves all of them. If you have Suomi, you build around her. Simple as that. Macchiato is a meta monster, especially in freeze teams. Her damage output is excellent, and her freeze typing pairs perfectly with Suomi, forming one of the strongest cores in the game. Together, they control fights while staying incredibly hard to kill. Her ultimate grants a frost barrier for 2 turns, adding another layer of survivability. Since Suomi also has access to similar shielding, those barriers are easy to refresh. Macchiato is strong, safe, and devastating in the right setup, and even without perfect synergy, she still performs at an elite level. Cheongju is, quite simply, the best character in Girls Frontline 2 Exilium. Her passive skill, Steady Plan, allows her to trigger 3 additional follow-up attacks whenever an enemy takes damage from an ally. That is an absurd amount of free damage. As fights go longer and enemies gain more health, Cheongju only gets stronger. Her mixed physical and burn damage lets her shred even the tankiest targets. Late game, early game, boss fights, if Cheongju is on your team, everything dies faster. Vector is mandatory if you are running a burn team. Armed with an SMG, she spreads burn debuffs rapidly and relentlessly, setting enemies up for explosive damage turns. Her passive, Perception Block, becomes especially disgusting when paired with Cheongju, increasing the number of burn-based support attacks. Together, they create a non-stop barrage of burning bullets that enemies simply cannot survive. Vector does one thing, and she does it perfectly. Springfield arrived globally on July 3rd, 2025, and immediately secured her place in the meta. She is an SSR support who provides long-range healing, team-wide buffs, debuff cleansing, and confectance index generation to fuel extra actions. She is a cornerstone of Hydro-focused teams, especially the dominant lineup featuring Springfield, Tololo, Mekti, and Klukai. Springfield keeps mobile allies alive from a safe distance while amplifying damage output. In sustain-heavy compositions, she is irreplaceable. Belka is the definition of consistency. She brings damage that scales well into harder content while offering enough utility to fit into multiple team types. She never feels out of place. What makes Belka special is how little attention she demands. No babysitting, no awkward setups, she just works. When you need a reliable pick that will always contribute, Belka is one of the safest choices in the entire roster. Lever is the undisputed queen of electric damage. Her abilities scale off enemy debuffs, and when those conditions are met, she absolutely annihilates bosses. Her damage ceiling is terrifying. She is strong right out of the gate, but with investment, she becomes absurd. Once Lever gets rolling, fights end quickly, and usually violently. She is a meta staple for a reason. Lena is the kind of character whose value sneaks up on you. She applies constant chip damage, stacks debuffs effortlessly, and brings crowd control and stealth into the mix. Her synergy with phase-based attackers like Lever makes her especially deadly. Thanks to her smooth rotations and high uptime, she stays relevant even without perfect team building. Friendly, flexible, and quietly lethal, Lena is a dream teammate. Rebella dominates close-range combat with brutal burst damage and pursuit attacks. Her freeze affinity allows her to lock down enemies before they can react, turning chaotic fights into controlled executions. Her kit rewards aggressive play with high impact and minimal setup. She feels like a brawler built for speed and control, blending ice effects with raw SMG power. Rebella does not just win fights, she overwhelms them. That's the S tier lineup. Characters that don't just perform well, but actively redefine what strong means in Girls Frontline 2 Exilium. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.